Voyagers picked up some passengers. We came to the aid of a damaged ship and brought it aboard. The doc's treating their injuries, not that they're being particularly grateful about it. This guy is dismissive of the doc for being a primitive simulation, and she talks to him like a condescending arse. The doc gives as good as he gets, while he calls Janeway down. I'd assumed their behaviour was reserved for just the Doctor, but they act like complete dicks to Janeway as well. I can only assume word of her prodigious armoury hasn't made it this far, or they'd realise how dangerous a game they're playing. The problem, according to Condescending Lady, is that they're quite secular, and that means they're not used to dealing with inferior species such as ours. Faced with such appreciative company, Janeway decides she'll leave the repairs of their ship up to them, and hopefully get rid of the pricks as soon as possible. They submit to being treated by the doc, and Janeway leaves, possibly to see if Neelix is in need of any raw meat. The doc hums and sings as he prepares their treatment, something that takes our cantankerous guests by surprise. For all of their superior technology, it seems they never bothered to invent music, and they're fascinated by it. They're trying to understand it purely on a mathematical basis. Dismissive guy suggests it might be an encryption code of some sort, and when the doctor tries explaining that it's more than simply the mathematical elements, Condescending Lady seems confused by the entire concept of art. The discovery has certainly elevated us in the eyes of our guests, and the doc doesn't seem too upset by their requests for more songs either. We arrive at their homeworld to find it rather busy. Despite that, a leader of some kind has found the time to give us a call, presumably prompted by Condescending Lady next to him. He's about as well-mannered as the others, and interrupts Janeway to ask about music, and specifically the doc, who he refers to as a device. Charming. We offer recordings of his performances, but that's not sufficient. They want access to him, and they're dangling the carrot of some advanced tech, so Janeway suggests a concert. We'll set up a show with various performers, and they can see him in the flesh. Well, photons. He's a hit, not only from his opera singing, but also his mathematically themed jokes. To give our guests a taste of something else, he hands the stage over to Kim and his group for some jazz. It's fair to say that Kim's clarinet is not quite so well received, which is a bit harsh given that it's basically the only character trait he's developed over the last 5.5 years. The group start to heckle him and demand a return of the Doctor, and Paris prompts him to join in before they start a riot. In fact, the interest from our guests in music seems to only apply when it overlaps with the Doctor, so much so that the leader wants him to make a performance on their planet. An adoring crowd hanging on his every word is something that plugs right into the Doc's vanity streak, and he's lapping up the attention. This hasn't gone unnoticed by the rest of the crew, and while Janeway may be erring on the side of diplomacy, B'Elanna is bound by no such desire and calls him out on it, something Condescending Lady considers to be the crew not showing him the proper appreciation. She's not wrong, but there's a difference between appreciation and idol worship, and we're swerving heavily into the latter. This matte painting, which feels oddly familiar for reasons I can't quite put my finger on, is where the building we'll be performing in is located. Condescending Lady's made all the alterations he requested to the venue and is checking up on him behind the curtain. She's probably getting enough airtime to deserve a proper name, but we're committed now, so she'll have to live with it. Maybe that'll teach her to not be an arsehole when she meets people. He's got the jitters, something not helped when told he's being broadcast around their planet. Be careful what you wish for, I guess. The lights go down and it's time to start. He needn't have worried. Before he even sings a note, they're giving him a standing ovation. Overreaction seems to be a theme with these people. Voyager switches over to mood lighting mode when Seven calls an alert. She thinks they're trying to launch an attack by disabling our communications through overloading it. You see, we've started receiving millions of messages addressed to the Doctor, and Seven's mistaken the fan mail for a DDoS attack. Once the difference is explained to her, she struggles to understand the appeal of celebrity culture. Such a position might carry more weight if she hadn't been part of a collective serving the whims of a queen, but let's ignore that for now. Fan mail isn't the only problem Voyager's having either. Tuvok's got a corridor full of the Doc's admirers, and it's not the only one. We'll stop more coming aboard, but it's time to deal with the source. He's in the mess hall and providing holographic souvenirs for his worshippers. Janeway's pissed at him using ship resources to replicate them, only to learn that the planet has dedicated an entire factory to making them for him. I'm not sure if that's better or worse. Either way, he's been neglecting his duties in sickbay, and Janeway makes it clear he should go there now. He complies, perhaps remembering what happened to the last crew member Janeway thought wasn't filling their designated role properly. Even sickbay isn't immune to his fanbase. 2 guests have feigned illness so they can be with him whether he wants that or not. Faced with the somewhat darker side of fame, the Doc first calls security, then removes himself. The only place he can find some peace is on the planet. Condescending Lady manages to find him, though, and has something to show him. It's a composition of her own written for him to perform. He's impressed, but the vocal range required is beyond that of the average human. She points out that he's not one, and, to be fair, she has a point. She also offers to adapt his program and give him a far wider audio capacity. There's no time for that, as Voyager will be leaving soon after his last performance tomorrow. Condescending Lady listens to this and offers a counter-proposal. Don't leave. The crew will manage without you, and if they don't, well, fuck 'em. Pleasing millions is more important than caring for 100 or so, at least to one of the millions anyway. And if that one also happens to imply that there might be more than professional admiration, then, well, it's something to consider, isn't it? The Doc's a program, which means he can consider things quicker than biological entities. That's why he's resigning from Starfleet. Janeway's reaction is entirely predictable, and she's dismissive of the whole idea. She thinks he's been swept up by fame, an argument that does have some merit, but that's not the only reason for her response. The Doc picks up on this and says if he were any other member of the crew, he'd have been permitted the choice. It's a topic they've discussed multiple times before, and it usually ends with Janeway accepting that she's wrong. She lays out her arguments, some of which at least are concern for the Doctor, that he's wrong about this and will be unhappy when the current trend for him is over. He counters by saying it's more than the celebrity status, and that Condescending Lady is a factor in his decision too. Anybody else on Voyager would be permitted to settle down and start a life if they wanted to. Faced with the choice of either going full inclusion and accepting the Doc's choice, or reverting to considering him as nothing more than equipment, she relents. It'll be a proper pain in the balls to adapt, not least of which as it'll mean Paris is the chief medical officer, but she realizes it wouldn't be right to keep the Doc here against his will. The Doc's saying his goodbyes. Paris first, and the Doc's making sure he knows to chase up on Janeway and largely ignore Neelix. He expected Paris to be pleased by the development, and is a little taken aback by learning that he's not. Seven's more of a problem, as he's basically her closest friend. She's not great at processing her emotion, and she's taking it out on him. Understandable, given the circumstances. With the exception of Borg Jesus, who was only around for a little while, this is the first time someone from the core of her Voyager collective has left. He struggles to get through to her, and after he receives a call from Condescending Lady, they part on bad terms. The reason for the call is a surprise, and one she says he'll like. She's created something new, not a piece of music this time, but a solution to his problem. The singing hologram is an upgraded version of his technology. It'll hit all the notes he couldn't, so now he doesn't need to stay. Isn't that wonderful? He tries to explain that singing is more than making the right noise, that it contains things beyond simply forming sound. She says she's copied that, too, a perfect facsimile of emotion. What's that? An implication that my interests might have been more than professional? I don't know what you mean, mate. Anyway, you'll be singing your farewell performance tomorrow. Cheers! The Doc's throwing caution to the wind and trying to give himself a vocal range equal to that of his replacement. That's terribly brave, considering how it's ended every time he's dicked around with his program, but he's not exactly being rational right now. Which is why he wants B'Elanna to help him delete all of that silly medicine data to free up space for the singing stuff. He explains that if he can only make himself able to sing this composition from Condescending Lady, he'll be able to repair all of this and still build himself the life he wants. I mean, okay, he was wrong about the interest from her, but it's still a pretty good gig. In an unusual bout of empathy for the Doc, B'Elanna explains that she can do it if he really wants, but by ripping out half his program, it'll fundamentally change who he is. He attends the performance later and tells the crowd that Condescending Lady has composed some music, but that he will be unable to sing it. The performance he gives instead is appreciated by those familiar with art, and less so by his new audience. His replacement, able to belt out any note you ask, regardless of whether they go together, receives adulation from the crowd and bemusement from the Voyager crew. Maybe we're just not clever enough to understand why that wasn't shit. Time to ask for his job back, I suppose. He says he'll delete anything to do with music so he can focus on medicine, and Janeway lets him have a nice big mouthful of his humble pie before cutting him off. He's to carry on just as he normally would, just like all the other members of her crew. Down in sick bay, he's playing with one of those souvenir holograms. Briefly, anyway, as he tosses it into a crate with some others. He didn't notice Seven's arrival and assumes it's to rub his nose in it. Instead, she's bringing one last piece of fan mail. He tries to decline, but she overrules and reads it for him. It says the sender is sorry for how his career turned out and that he'll always be admired by those around him, and it's signed by 7 of 9. After she leaves, the Doc reads the note for himself while singing as we fly away. I've never really been one for the cult of celebrity, which is probably just as well given how a fair portion of the entertainers of my childhood turned out. That's probably due to the prospect of fame being vaguely terrifying to me. All those people paying constant attention. I enjoy my peace far too much for that. But just like conspiracy cults, I can understand the appeal even if I don't subscribe to it myself. Normal people come with flaws, requirements, or demands for time or attention, differences of opinion, all those things that accompany actual interaction with another human. People, bluntly, are a lot of fucking work. But the carefully curated display often shown in a parasocial relationship with celebrities hides those flaws. We see the best of them, or what they present as being them anyway, and the tenuously believable fantasy of it all certainly has a pull to it. On the other side of the glass, celebrities enjoy a level of power that extends beyond mere material wealth. The adulation of strangers and their willingness to accommodate you can be intoxicating. It's easy to see why the Doc succumbs to this intoxication and lets it flow over him, even before you take into account his half-a-decade struggle to be appreciated as more than a gadget. When you feel like you're taken for granted and someone comes along who treats you differently, then, well, why wouldn't you prefer that? And that question of appreciation is one of the few long-running threads of Voyager. The argument that the Doc and Janeway have about his resignation has been a long time coming. Indeed, it's one they've been having in slow motion for over 5 years now. It's the final step on his right to autonomy, the ability to walk away. A job you can't quit isn't a job, it's servitude. To her credit, Janeway generally comes out of them having adapted her position, and we see the same again here. Strong leaders listen. We also get a look at something I've been poking at for a little while, whether the Doc actually likes medicine. We have a scene where he's willing to throw it all away, of course, but he wasn't exactly thinking straight when that happened, so we'll mulligan that one. A better example is when he's trying to explain to Seven why he wants to leave. He says the fans of his singing appreciate him not for what I've been programmed to do, but for who I've become. We've pondered that here a few times. Do the skills he's gained after being brought online carry a different weight to the ones for which he was created? Interestingly, it's B'Elanna who provides a counterpoint to this. She tells him that deletion of his medical knowledge would fundamentally alter who he is. He may not have chosen to hold that information, and he may strain against it at times, but it's still a part of him. How much of the way he behaves is down to that knowledge? I've made no secret that I'm fond of the Doctor. He's consistently been the best source of character advancement for the show. Now that I think about it, we're back to what I was saying in the last episode summary about our desire to witness growth. Maybe this is all more connected than I thought. Before we leave, we'll give a point to whoever made the Komar, our species of the week, all be shorter than human average. We've mentioned before how Trek's aliens are frequently not particularly alien. Altering the average height might be a relatively basic method of establishing a difference, but it worked for the Hirogen, and it works again here, too. End of episode.
You know, I've been thinking, do we even need to do this?
Do what?
Try and kill Tom Paris.
I thought you wanted to.
Yeah, but that's when I thought it'd be easy. This is too much like work. Besides, look at how they run this ship. Anytime they find something dangerous, they just stick their faces in it. Realistically, how long are any of them gonna last?
You do realize that means we'll have to come up with another shtick for these credit sequences, right? They used to be for advertising the Patreon, before they got out of hand, like everything else on this clusterfuck of a channel. Do you really want to go back to that? A shill for the chicken mac dipshit who runs all of this?
Fair point, son. I'll have another think about killing Paris. Woof.